This is a Crafty Scribe's ink tutorial. I want to give you a quick walkthrough of all the tools I use to make my ready mix inks. We have our dry pigment, gum arabic, distilled water, and a water rinsing bowl. You can use tap water or distilled water, and some people even use a solution to be more careful with their metal nibs, but I've always used just tap water, distilled water. With my more precious dry pigments, I have a separate bowl, whether it's a ceramic mortar and pestle or this glass canning jar is what I use for my rinsing bowl. I usually put in a little bit of distilled water, and then I rinse off my nib with the more precious pigment, or any pigment really, and then I set it aside after I'm done to dry, and at a future date I can reanimate it or refresh it with distilled water, and if the consistency is not right I put in a little bit more gum arabic, but you can reuse dry pigments, which is very cool. I have a plate where I rest my writing tip or writing utensil. That way it avoids messes. I have small measuring spoons because dry pigment will go a long way. So I have 1/32, 1/16, and 1/8 teaspoons. I have an eyedropper. Some pigments use less water, and a lot of this will be your preference on whether you want it more opaque or more transparent, how it flows off your writing utensil. The writing utensil you use will also change the consistency of your ink as well. And also add in the variable of your writing surface. What paper you use also will change the consistency of the ink that you need, how much it absorbs, for example, your ink. So here in my collection I have authentic handmade Egyptian papyrus, authentic Mayan Hun paper, aged parchment, and I really like this I usually use this to create my recipes, and as I'm going along with my different projects. I'm a writer as well, so I write calligraphically my poetry and my short stories onto aged parchment. Here we have antiqued parchment, and you have to be careful with this type. This is more for artistic projects. I like the look of it, but for water-based inks, a lot of times what happens is you'll get bleed through. So you have to be very careful, or use maybe an acrylic paint to have it stay more on the surface. I really love how many different colors of calligraphy paper there are. Just be careful of the weight. This one is really thin, so it tends to bleed through, but the other ones, aged parchments, and a lot of other different heavier weight parchments, are very good to have the ink stay on the surface. I also love how it has, these are all different colors of whites and off-whites and aged. These are like blue, pink, green. I like this handmade paper for its feel. It has a nice soft texture to it. So getting back to the ink, use with the earth-based, mineral-based pigments, equal portions. So if I use, for example, 1/16 of dry pigment, gum arabic, and distilled water, I'll mix it together. First, as I said, the gum arabic and dry pigment to have it mixed and kind of stick together first, and then add in the water to finish the mixture. And with each pigment, I've created recipes of my own, and it is a trial by error sort of process. Like I was trying my limonite, and I used this recipe, and it was too watery. And it's all based on preference and how you're using it. Like I said, the writing surface or the writing utensil you use, and how it flows off that writing utensil. Your recipe is going to vary, but I also am a person who likes to create recipes or have recipes at hand, so I am more than willing to post those on my website. It's a work in progress, but for example, for my indigo blue, I use the eyedropper, the water dropper, to put in that, because the Mayan colors are dye-based, which means they are water soluble. They mix more easily. The earth base, like the limonite, is more minerally, so I use the teaspoons to measure the water with. It's all a matter of preference as well. Finally, I have a nib holder or writing utensil holder, and I create these with Kiln-A-Knit with clay, and I mix in my pigments with the clay, and then I bake it. I will include a do-it-yourself video at some point about how I make these, if you're interested. Also, I have a paper towel or multiple paper towels or a fabric towel to periodically clean off the nib and keep it clean. With the dry pigments, a lot of times the ink dries on the nib and you'll have to clean it off with water, or if you're using more precious pigments, use that bowl. And then also kind of give it a quick clean before you redip it into your ink and restart your writing or your artwork. With these ready mix inks, every once in a while, just like shaking an ink bottle, you are going to want to give it a stir just to keep the consistency and color that you want being printed or painted on your page or your other type of writing surface.